Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Koleno, and today's conversation is confidential remarks intended to challenge how we think about professionalism, trust, and competitive advantage in modern real estate. For decades, the industry rewarded access to information. The professional who controlled listings, pricing knowledge, negotiation tactics, and transaction complexity held enormous leverage. But today, that world is disappearing in real time. Consumers now arrive informed. They research before they call. They compare before they commit. And increasingly, they can identify whether someone is acting as a true advisor or simply protecting an outdated sales model. This presentation is not about attacking the industry. It is about understanding the transition happening inside it, because the professionals who adapt to this shift will build durable trust and long-term relevance. The professionals who resist it will slowly lose credibility, influence, and market position. Today we're going to explore two archetypes, the traditional gatekeeper and the modern advisor. One depends on controlling information. The other wins by empowering the consumer. And the market has already started choosing between them. For most of modern real estate history, professionals benefited from what economists call information asymmetry. In simple terms, the professional knew far more than the consumer. That imbalance created power. Access to listings, pricing intelligence, hidden fee structures, and transaction mechanics all lived behind the curtain. Consumers depended on professionals because they had no alternative source of reliable information. But that monopoly has collapsed. Today, consumers can compare prices instantly. They can research commissions, understand financing structures, and learn negotiation strategies before ever speaking to an agent. What once took years of insider access is now available in minutes online. And this is not a gradual adjustment. It's a structural correction happening across every industry touched by the internet and artificial intelligence. The important realization is this: consumers are no longer evaluating professionals based on access to information. They are evaluating professionals based on interpretation, honesty, and clarity. That changes the entire foundation of trust. There are three major external forces dismantling the traditional gatekeeping model. The first is consumer transparency expectations. Companies like Amazon train consumers to expect open pricing, reviews, comparisons, and immediate clarity. Hidden fees and vague explanations now create suspicion instead of confidence. The second force is education at scale. Millions of consumers now learn through YouTube, podcasts, blogs, and independent creators. Buyers and sellers no longer begin their journey with an agent. Often they begin with education. And the third force is artificial intelligence. Tools like ChatGPT and Perplexity can now explain contracts, financing structures, commission models, and transaction processes in plain language almost instantly. That means the professional's role is no longer to guard information. Information has escaped the walls. The new role is helping consumers interpret what matters, avoid bad decisions, and navigate emotional complexity with confidence. The moat is no longer built around secrecy. It's built around judgment. At this point, the industry faces two very different paths. One path attempts to defend the old system. It protects complexity, minimizes disclosure, and tries to preserve leverage through information control. That approach may still create short-term transactions, but it steadily erodes trust. The second path embraces transparency. It leads with education, proactive disclosure, and consumer empowerment. Instead of fearing informed clients, it welcomes them. This is the key distinction. The advisor model understands that trust compounds over time. Consumers remember the professional who explained the hidden fee before being asked. They remember the professional who encouraged comparison instead of resisting it. And they remember the professional who helped them make the right decision, even when it reduced short-term profit. That is how reputations become durable. The market is not waiting for the industry to agree on this transition. Consumers are already rewarding the professionals who operate this way. The traditional gatekeeper is not necessarily malicious. In many cases, this model was inherited from an earlier era where information scarcity created value. But the structure itself depends on dependency. Information is controlled instead of openly shared. Complexity becomes leverage. Industry jargon replaces clarity. Compensation structures remain difficult to understand. And over time, the relationship becomes transaction first instead of consumer first. The problem is that this model becomes increasingly fragile in a world where consumers can independently verify almost everything. The moment a client discovers information elsewhere that should have been explained up front, trust begins to fracture. What once looked like expertise now risks looking like avoidance. That is why protecting the old model becomes dangerous. It asks professionals to defend a system consumers are already moving away from. Historically, consumers deferred to professionals because they had limited ability to verify information independently. Authority itself created trust. But today, one Google search can challenge that authority instantly. That changes the psychology of the relationship. Consumers no longer want blind faith. They want partnership. They want transparency. They want to understand what is happening and why. And this is important. Informed consumers are not rejecting expertise. They are rejecting unexplained expertise. The professionals who become defensive when questioned create suspicion. The professionals who welcome questions create confidence. The advisor mindset understands that scrutiny is not the enemy of trust. Scrutiny is how trust is earned in the modern world. For years, many professionals relied on manufactured authority signals. Awards, billboards, rankings, slogans, and self-promotion were designed to create credibility quickly. And historically, that worked because consumers had limited ways to evaluate expertise independently. But today, consumers trust demonstrated knowledge more than advertised status. A professional who publishes educational content, explains complex processes clearly, and openly teaches, the consumer creates a very different kind of authority. That authority is verifiable. Education compounds. Self-promotion fades. In the modern market, the professional who acts like a library becomes more valuable than the professional who acts like a billboard. Consumers are no longer asking who claims to be the best. They're asking who helps me understand the most. The modern advisor operates from a completely different philosophy. Instead of controlling information, they distribute it freely. Instead of hiding complexity, they simplify it. Instead of prioritizing transactions, they prioritize outcomes. Transparency becomes the strategy, not the risk. The advisor explains fees up front. They encourage informed decisions. They help consumers compare options fairly, even if that comparison introduces competition. Why? Because they understand something critical. Trust is now the strongest competitive advantage available. Consumers remember how professionals made them feel during moments of uncertainty. Clarity creates relief. Honesty creates confidence. Education creates loyalty. The advisor model is not idealistic. It is strategically superior in a transparent world. Artificial intelligence can access enormous amounts of information. In many cases, it can retrieve data faster than any human professional. So the future advantage is not access to information. The future advantage is interpretation, judgment, and empathy. Consumers still need help understanding trade-offs. They still need guidance navigating emotional decisions. They still need someone who can synthesize conflicting information into clear action. Technology can deliver answers, but wisdom requires context. The advisor of the future becomes less like a gatekeeper and more like a strategic interpreter, someone who helps consumers think clearly when the stakes are high. That human layer cannot be automated easily, and that is where the next era of professional value will be built. Consumers experience relief when professionals explain difficult things clearly before being asked. That relief becomes trust. When fees are disclosed proactively, trust increases. When alternatives are presented honestly, trust increases. When accountability remains after the transaction, trust deepens even further. Transparency is no longer optional branding language. It is operational behavior. And consumers are remarkably good at detecting the difference between performative transparency and genuine transparency. The advisor standard is simple. If a consumer would feel surprised learning something later, it should probably be explained earlier. That mindset transforms the entire relationship. On the left side is the gatekeeper mindset: control, opacity, manufactured authority, and transaction-centered thinking. On the right side is the advisor mindset: education, transparency, guided simplicity, and consumer-first alignment. This framework can be used to evaluate organizations, teams, vendors, partnerships, and even ourselves. Every communication either increases clarity or decreases it. Every process either empowers the consumer or creates dependency. The critical question is not what professionals claim to value. The critical question is what their systems actually reward. Because consumers eventually experience the truth of the model regardless of the marketing language around it. Fee transparency has become one of the defining trust tests of the modern market. In the old model, compensation structures were often difficult to understand. Referral arrangements, administrative fees, and conflicts of interest remained buried inside paperwork or discussed vaguely. The advisor standard moves in the opposite direction. Compensation is disclosed clearly, early, and in writing. Consumers understand exactly what services they are paying for and how professionals are compensated. This matters because hidden incentives distort trust. The moment a consumer suspects information is being filtered by undisclosed financial motives, credibility weakens. Transparency protects both the consumer and the professional. It creates alignment instead of suspicion. Language reveals intent. The gatekeeper language says, "Don't worry about the details," or "just trust me." The underlying goal is often to end scrutiny quickly and maintain control of the process. The advisor language sounds very different. It says, "Let me show you how this works. Here are your options." Let's compare the trade-offs together. One communication style creates dependency. The other creates partnership. And modern consumers overwhelmingly prefer partnership. People do not distrust expertise. They distrust expertise that resists transparency. That distinction is becoming one of the most important communication shifts in modern business. The advisor model ultimately becomes an operating system. It means empowering informed decisions instead of pushing rushed outcomes. It means explaining incentives before consumers discover them independently. It means simplifying complexity instead of weaponizing it. It also means teaching consumers how to evaluate options fairly, even when that evaluation introduces competition. That level of transparency requires confidence. But in the long run, it creates stronger relationships, stronger referrals, stronger reputation, and stronger durability, because trust compounds. And in an age where information is abundant, trust becomes the rarest and most valuable asset in the marketplace. The future of real estate will not belong to the loudest salesperson. It will belong to the clearest advisor. Consumers are becoming more informed, more skeptical, and more empowered every year. That trend is not reversing. The professionals who succeed in the next decade will not be the ones who fight transparency. They will be the ones who operationalize it. They will lead with education. They will simplify complexity. They will explain incentives openly. And they will build trust before asking for commitment. That is not weakness. That is the next competitive advantage. The crossroads is not coming someday. It is already here. And the individuals, firms, and institutions that embrace this transition first will inherit the future of trust in this industry. This has been Confidential Remarks.